My name is Nevaeh, 34 years old, living in a quiet suburb north of Seattle. 3 days after the memorial for my husband, the man who died saving a family from a burning house, I returned to my mother's home for some rest. But the moment I opened the front door, I froze. My mother was beaming, helping a young woman try on a wedding gown, right in the middle of my living room. And standing next to her was Clark, my younger brother. When I asked what was going on, my mother just smiled and said something that chilled me to the bone. Nevaeh, this is Clark's new fiancé. And your room, we've cleared it out. Have you ever felt erased from your own life by the people closest to you? If you've ever been made to feel invisible in your own family, leave a comment below. Tap like if you believe silence doesn't mean acceptance. And don't forget to subscribe, because what they did after that was worse than you'd imagine. I sat in silence on the old wooden chair in the corner of the kitchen, the same spot where Aaron used to stand every morning making coffee, humming country songs and smiling at me, pretending to be mad because he always forgot to put the lid back on the pot. 6 months had passed since he collapsed in that fire on the west side of town. They called him a hero. But when the final note of the funeral trumpet faded, when the last wreath withered on his grave, there was only me, a 34-year-old widow with a wedding ring on her finger and an emptiness that no one in my family ever tried to fill. My mother, Evelyn, never thought Aaron was good enough. Even when I told her how he dropped out of college in his final year to work extra jobs and pay off medical debts for the foster mother who raised him, she just responded coldly, "That doesn't make him a decent man." To her, Aaron was always that orphan boy, dragging debt and baggage. The day Aaron died, I called her from the hospital. Her voice was the same as always, sweet but distant. "Don't be dramatic. Just come home for a few days, we'll figure things out later." I didn't want to go. But my apartment was too small, every corner still held pieces of him. The shirt he hung behind the door, the wet shoes he hadn't dried yet, the birthday card I hadn't opened. I moved into my mother's house with 2 suitcases and a small wooden box containing Aaron's ashes. She greeted me with a half-hug, her eyes still fixed on the cooking show playing on the TV. "Your old room upstairs is ready." I washed the sheets. I thought it was just a temporary stay, a quiet pause to recover. But I didn't know that silence was a mask hiding something deeper. Each week, pieces of Aaron's life began disappearing. First, it was the gray hoodie I clung to when I couldn't sleep. Mom said, "I tried to wash it and lost track of it. Maybe you left it somewhere." Then the wedding photo that used to hang by the stairs. Then the handwritten birthday card I kept on my nightstand. Every time I asked, she would shrug or wave it off like none of it ever existed. One day, I opened a drawer to find our wedding album to send a copy to an old friend, and the entire album was gone. I searched every inch of my room, asked my mom, asked Clark, my younger brother, but everyone just said, "Maybe you misplaced it." I didn't believe them. And around that time, I began noticing new things appearing. Pillows embroidered with Delilah, Clark's girlfriend's name, unfamiliar perfume bottles in the bathroom, a pair of size 6 heels by the door that I'd never worn. The house was changing. Not in the way I needed, but in a way that made me feel like an unwanted guest. I brought it up with my mom. One morning, while she was slicing strawberries at the kitchen counter, I finally worked up the courage to ask, "Have you seen Aaron's things? I can't find anything anymore." She didn't look up, just said flatly, "You're probably imagining things. When people grieve too hard, they remember things wrong." I clenched my fists but didn't argue. I didn't have the energy to fight. The pain was still fresh enough that even a strong breath could make the tears spill. Clark was different. He avoided my eyes whenever I brought up Aaron. My brother had once been close to him. They rebuilt the backyard fence together one summer, played ping pong in the garage every Thanksgiving. But after the funeral, Clark changed. He stopped talking to me, stayed out late, and had phone calls he'd quickly end whenever I entered the room. Then one day, I saw Delilah in the kitchen. Aaron's ex, the one who'd left him before we started dating because she couldn't handle being poor. She was cooking butternut squash soup, wearing an apron embroidered with an E, the same one Aaron had custom-made for me. She smiled brightly when she saw me. "Nevaeh, I didn't think you were still here." That line, soft as it was, felt like a punch to the chest. I stepped out of the kitchen saying nothing. In my head, a question pounded. When did she decide she had the right to cook in this house? And why is everyone acting like I don't exist? I started documenting everything. Writing down the dates when Aaron's things went missing. noting down strange remarks from my mom, side glances from Clark. And I discovered a pattern. Every time I left the house, even just for a few hours, something would change. Furniture moved, cabinets repainted, artwork on the walls swapped for abstract paintings I'd never seen. I ran a test. One day, I pretended to go grocery shopping but came back early. I stood silently at the edge of the living room, heart pounding, and heard my mother's voice. "Don't worry, she won't be back. Just a few more weeks and it's all done." That sentence sent a chill down my spine. Done? What did she mean? She was talking about me like I was a project to be cleared out, not her daughter. I went back to my room, closed the door gently. What I felt wasn't just grief. There was fire. A different kind of fire. One that didn't burn me, but lit up the truth they were trying to bury. And I knew if I didn't rise now, they would keep erasing every piece of what I once loved, once believed, once was. That night, rain fell gently on the roof, each drop tapping against the window pane like the sighs of unspoken truths. I lay awake, hallway light leaking in under the door. It was close to 1 a.m. and I couldn't sleep. Something gnawed at me like the house itself was holding in a sound only I could hear. Then I actually heard it. A soft metal click like something tapping against wood echoing from the basement stairs. I sat up, holding my breath. The sound didn't repeat. Just once, but enough to send a chill crawling up my spine. The basement was where I had stored Aaron's last keepsakes. Our wedding photos, the handwritten letter he left me before his final shift, the firefighter gear he told me, "If anything happens to me, keep it for me." I slipped out quietly, walking down the dark hallway. Everything was silent. But when I reached the wooden staircase, the motion sensor light flicked on, revealing the basement door. Once left ajar, never locked, now secured with a brand new brass combination lock. On the handle was a small note. "Temporarily unavailable. Authorized personnel only." I stood frozen. This was my space. The things I left down there were off limits to anyone else. I knelt down, trying the handle, but the lock held tight. I jiggled it gently, scanning for any clue. Then I spotted a small detail I had missed, laser-etched under the edge of the lock's metal faceplate. "Registered owner, Clark B. Rowan." I clenched my fist. In that moment I understood. It wasn't just my mother. Clark was in on it too. They didn't just want me out of the house. They wanted to erase everything that belonged to me and Aaron. I turned and walked straight to my mother's room. Her light was still on. She lay on her side, reading news on her tablet, gold-rimmed glasses slipping down her nose. I didn't knock. I pushed the door open. She looked up, mildly surprised, then frowned. "Why aren't you asleep?" I stood firm, voice steady. "The basement's locked." "New lock. Clark's name on it." "Can you explain?" Evelyn took off her glasses, set them on the nightstand, and let out a long sigh, like I'd asked something tedious. "Clark is redoing the downstairs. My niece is moving in after the wedding. She needs her own space." I furrowed my brow. "Your niece? Who?" "Mia. Mary's daughter. My cousin's kid. She's moving back after the wedding for work in the city. Clark agreed to let her use the basement as her studio." I tightened my hands. "What about my stuff? The wedding photos, Aaron's letters, his gear? My bookshelf, my art supplies? They're all down there." My mother smiled lightly as if it was nothing serious. "I packed them up. Anything still usable I stored. The rest. I had someone clear it out." "Cleared it out?" I repeated, not believing what I'd just heard. "You mean, threw it all away?" "My dear, you can't live in the past forever. Everyone's just trying to move forward. Aaron, he's gone. You should let it all go too." I felt like the floor beneath me tilted. "You had no right to touch my things. Those were the only pieces of him I had left." My mother stayed calm. "This is my house. You're only staying temporarily. I didn't think you'd be this upset over a few old pictures. If you want, I'll ask Clark to give a few back." I bit my lip until it bled, nodded slightly, and turned to leave the room. Not another word. I knew if I stayed one more minute, I wouldn't be able to hold back the tears. Back in my room, I dropped onto the bed, heart pounding like someone was banging on a door inside my chest. My mind spun with 100 questions. Had they read Aaron's letters? Did they burn the wedding photos? What about the jacket he wore that last morning? Where was it? I couldn't keep thinking. I reached into the drawer, pulled out my small notebook, and wrote down the date, time, and everything that had just happened, then locked it away. I knew if I didn't take action, everything tied to me would disappear like that basement already had. While the rest of the house slept peacefully, I sat in silence, listening to the rain tapping the roof, wondering who was truly unwelcome in this house. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The sun hadn't fully risen, but the gray light filtering through the curtains gave the room a soft, melancholy glow. Quietly, I began folding clothes into my old suitcase. Not because I was leaving immediately, but because I needed something concrete, something physical to keep from breaking apart. With each fold, each zip of the bag, I felt the boundaries inside me slowly becoming clearer. As I dragged the suitcase out from under the bed, I heard the soft clink of metal. It was the small metal box with a combination lock, where Aaron and I used to keep the most important things. I'd forgotten it was still here after the funeral, never brave enough to open it again. I wiped the thin layer of dust off the lid and turned the dials. My fingers froze for a second when I noticed the heavy dust on the back of my hand, like I'd let myself decay in silence all these months. The box clicked open. Inside was a neat bundle of documents held together with an old copper clip. I pulled them out, laid them on the bed, each page trembling slightly with my rapid breathing. The first was a copy of Aaron's life insurance policy. At the bottom, in the section labeled Sole Beneficiary, my name was printed clearly, Nevaeh Rowan, along with my personal bank account number. Policy value, $940,000. Next to it was the confirmation letter from the insurance company, stating the payout had been approved on the 5th, just days after the funeral. I turned to the next page. It was the deed of property transfer, a notarized document signed by Aaron before he died. The name listed as the legal owner of the house was mine. Not my mother's. Not Clark's. I dropped the papers, backing away like I'd touched fire. Every question that had piled up in my head now stood sharp and clear. Why my mother always made me feel temporary. Why Clark had gone cold. Why Aaron's belongings had disappeared as if they'd never existed. They knew. They had known all along. They knew this house belonged to me. They knew that money was mine. And they had been working to make me feel like a guest, a ghost to be erased so I wouldn't disturb the living. I stepped out of my room, folder still in hand. Downstairs, I heard the sound of a vegetable peeler and my mother's soft laugh with Delilah. They were making breakfast like everything was fine. I stood there, gripping the edge of the cabinet, staring at the cold white tile floor I used to scrub every weekend when I was still the good daughter. I didn't go down. I turned back, locked the door, and sat on the edge of my bed, hugging the folder to my knees. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Just a deep, bone-tired ache. I realized Aaron's final gift to me wasn't financial. It was a warning, written in action. I picked up the phone and called Aaron's old lawyer, Mark Jensen, the one who helped him write his will. His voice was calm and steady, just as I remembered. Nevaeh? I was expecting this call. You knew. I know more than you think. Aaron left me a sealed folder. He instructed me that if, after his death, you showed any signs of being manipulated or erased from your legal rights, I was to protect you. I bit my lip, forcing myself to stay calm. I found the insurance documents and the property deed. The house is in my name, right? Yes. Everything Aaron owned was transferred into your name, including his small stake in the fire department. No one can touch it without your consent. I nodded. I didn't need anyone else's confirmation. I knew I had no choice but to leave, but now I wouldn't be leaving quietly. I want to file an immediate suspension of all usage rights to the property at my mother's address. Can we do that today? I'll send someone over. But Nevaeh. Yes. Do you want them to find out right away or let them feel it slowly? I looked out the window at the white ceramic sign on the vine-covered fence that still read Evelyn's family, the one I'd commissioned the year she became a grandmother. I answered softly but firmly, I want them to feel it. Not through words, but through every little thing they thought was theirs. I hung up, folded the papers, and slid them into my bag. The rage was gone. In its place was a cold clarity I never knew I had. I stood up on my own 2 feet, not to run away but to reclaim every piece of me they tried to bury. That afternoon I sat on the wicker chair on the porch trying to keep my mind from spiraling. My phone buzzed. It was the insurance company's line, specifically for Aaron's policy. I picked up, my tea still untouched. We need to verify some recent activity regarding the beneficiary account, the rep said formally. There was a request submitted 3 days ago to change the beneficiary information. The file claims Mrs. Nevaeh Rowan has been deemed mentally unfit and requests full transfer of funds to her legal representative, Clark Rowan. We've frozen the account pending further verification. I jumped to my feet, heart pounding so loud it echoed in my ears. I'm sorry, who submitted that request? Clark Rowan and Mrs. Evelyn Rowan. They included a medical statement from a private psychologist in Spokane. But due to irregularities in the file, we need in-person confirmation. I don't remember how I ended the call. All sound faded into static. I couldn't believe my mother and brother, the two who claimed they wanted me to feel safe, supported, had done something this cruel. They didn't just want the money. They wanted to erase me from my own life. I drove to Aaron's lawyer's office without calling ahead. When I arrived, he was standing by the window, back turned. He turned slowly, his expression unsurprised. You got the call from the bank? I nodded, dropping my bag onto the chair. My hands were still shaking. You knew about this? He exhaled. They filed a petition in county court to have you declared mentally incompetent, citing prolonged depression after your husband's death. They attached a psychological evaluation with a forged stamp. I bit down on my lip until I tasted blood, fists clenched so tightly my fingers went numb. What are they trying to do? They want to transfer all rights to the insurance policy, the house, the investments, into the name of your legal guardian. According to their file, that would be Clark. I laughed. Dry. Bitter. Guardian? Clark can't even manage a phone bill. My mother still has someone print her emails. Mark didn't smile. His voice turned firm. I've filed an emergency objection. Fortunately, both the insurance system and the bank required dual verification, so no transactions went through. But Nevaeh, if you don't act decisively right now, they'll find another way. I looked at him, no longer with panic in my eyes but something colder, more alert. I want to file a lawsuit for identity fraud and attempted asset theft. Mark nodded. I'll move forward with that. But at the same time, you need to send a formal ownership confirmation to every relevant party. The bank, insurance company, tax office, even the city authorities. I nodded. I don't just want them to know I'm still here. I want them to know I'm the one whose name is on everything. The one with the rights. And I'm done staying quiet. On my way back, I stopped by a small coffee shop next to City Hall. In my hands wasn't just a phone or paperwork. It was a piece of my life I had once handed over simply because someone was family. I didn't feel like someone waiting to be accepted. I was rewriting my place in that house, in that family, not with pleading but with evidence, with signatures, with the law. I opened my laptop and logged into the remote storage system Aaron once helped me set up. The place where we kept all our important documents. Every line that popped up on the screen felt like a reminder from the man who was no longer here, yet somehow still watching every step I took. The house they're living in, it's under my name. The insurance account, I'm the legal beneficiary. Medical records, I never registered for any mental health treatment, especially not in Spokane. I stayed there until the cafe closed, sending over 24 emails to legal and financial agencies. I didn't know how long this would take. But I knew one thing. They were wrong to think I'd keep staying silent, keep enduring, keep letting them define me through my grief. I'm not just the widow of a dead man. I'm a survivor. And this time I'm living for myself. I didn't scream. I didn't slam doors. I didn't call my mother to confront her or send Clark a single word of accusation. Instead, I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name that had sat untouched for nearly 2 years. Julian Reese, Aaron's old friend, now a private investigator in Tacoma. Aaron once told me, Julian never asks the wrong question, he just finds the right answer. I called. On the third ring, Julian's deep, gravelly voice came through. I need the truth, I said simply. Where are you? I'll send the address. It's not the old house. So it's finally started. It started a long time ago, I said. I'm just not backing down anymore. The next day, Julian arrived carrying a small black case and a look that said he understood everything just from the sound of my voice the night before. We met at Aaron's old studio, a small 2-story white wooden house tucked behind rows of pine trees near Westport Beach. It was once the place where Aaron painted and trained on his days off. He had signed it over to me right after we got married, a quiet gift he never boasted about to my family. My mother didn't even know this place existed. And now it was where I'd begin my counterattack. Julian didn't ask much. He opened his laptop and laid out his usual gear: external drives, remote data scanners, and an encrypted Wi-Fi signal analyzer. I handed him the folder I'd already prepared: bank statements, utility bills under my name, property registration, and recent emails from the bank and tax office. "What do you need first?" he asked. "I need proof they used my name illegally, to change beneficiary info, access my assets, and file that fake guardianship request. I want records of everything." Julian nodded. "Are the cameras at the old house still active?" "They are. I never disconnected the original app. Clark thinks I forgot the password. But I never forgot." I handed him my phone and logged into the security system. The interface appeared, split into 4 screens: living room, stairwell, kitchen, backyard. Everything was still running fine. Julian hooked up his recorder and began extracting the past 3 months of footage. As each day sped by on the screen, I watched scenes that made my throat tighten. Clark laughing with Delilah on the same couch where Aaron used to read, my mother tidying the living room and tossing a framed photo into the trash, and them posting a sign over the basement: "Mia's private studio." I clenched my fists but said nothing. Julian printed out key video clips, timestamped stills, and audio from a moment my mother spoke on the phone. "She's weak now. Just a little finesse and we'll get everything back." She said it while standing in the kitchen holding a mug with lotus flowers, the same one I'd given her for Mother's Day when I turned 28. Within 3 days, Julian had built a full digital case: attempted asset appropriation, unauthorized access to financial records, and an audio recording of my mother talking with her private attorney about temporarily shifting ownership to avoid legal trouble later. I sent the full file to my attorney, Mr. Jensen. Within a week, legal warning letters had reached the city legal office, the bank, the insurance company, and local financial authorities, formally declaring that any attempt to alter property or asset rights under my name was illegal and currently under investigation. Attached was a verified asset statement: the house at 1874 Pine Ridge Drive, a $940,000 beneficiary account, a small business share, an art studio in Westport, and utilities, all under the name Nevaeh Rowan, sole owner. I also moved all digital assets, bank accounts, medical records, personal documents, to a high-level security system, using a service Aaron once recommended. It automatically locks after 30 seconds of inactivity and requires both fingerprint and voice authentication. As for the beach house, my current residence, I hired a private security firm to install a triple-layer alarm system, independent cameras, and auto-alert features if anyone tries to gain access without verified credentials. I wasn't running. I was preparing. I didn't need to shout that I'd been betrayed. I let the faxes, the emails, and the legal notices speak for me. Not out of revenge, but to remind them that I was still here. And I was never weak. That evening, as I stood by the second-floor window watching the ink-black ocean waves roll quietly onto the cold sand, my heart felt lighter than it had in months. Not because I'd found comfort, but because I'd chosen to rise, not through screams but through clarity. Through stillness that carried weight. I rested my hand on the old leather chair, where Aaron used to sit while painting his first canvases, and whispered, "I never let them erase you." Then I picked up a brush, dipped it into deep blue, and began sketching the first lines of a new painting titled, "Still." A few days after my lawyer sent out that round of legal notices, I received an invitation to a family meeting on a Saturday morning. The letter was printed on thick white paper, my mother's familiar handwriting still firm and precise. "The family needs to talk in person. Please come by 3 p.m. We need to clear up some misunderstandings." Not a single word of apology. No acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Just a command dressed up in polite wording. I sat in front of the glass wall of the beach house, slowly turning Aaron's wedding band between my fingers. For a moment I considered not going. But then I thought of Aaron, of the nights he sat quietly crunching numbers so his wife would never have to bow her head to anyone. He didn't bow to fire. So I wouldn't bow to lies. 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I stepped into my mother's living room to the familiar hum of relatives, The clinking of teacups, chairs being adjusted, a few brittle laughs. No one knew I hadn't come alone. Behind me was Mr. Jensen, my attorney, dressed in a gray suit carrying a worn leather briefcase. Walking beside him was Mrs. Camille, the notary public, her silver hair neatly pinned up, holding a case of legal documents and her seal. The room fell silent as I entered. Evelyn looked up first. My mother was wearing a soft beige outfit and the pearl necklace I once gave her on my grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary. Her eyes narrowed slightly when she saw Mr. Jensen. "Nevaeh," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. "You brought outsiders to a family meeting?" I sat down across from her, easing my hand out of my coat pocket, my voice not loud but crystal clear. "This isn't a family meeting. This is a legal disclosure." A few of the relatives glanced at one another, whispering. Clark sat with his leg crossed, holding a glass of orange juice, but his fingers trembled. Delilah quickly set her teacup down, sitting up straighter. I opened my folder and pulled out a copy of the trust agreement for the Aaron Rowan Hope Foundation. My voice was steady and deliberate. "I am officially transferring my entire inheritance, including the house in Westport, the life insurance account, my personal shares, and the ownership of the studio, into a charitable foundation dedicated to supporting families of fallen firefighters." I laid the documents on the table and slid them toward my mother. "These assets are no longer mine. And they certainly don't belong to anyone else in this room." Evelyn clenched her hands on her lap, her lips pressed into a thin line. You're doing this for what reason?" "I'm doing this for Aaron. For myself. And because I refuse to let the things that were meant to be memories between us be turned into weapons of control one more time." The air in the room grew dense. I reached for the next document, a court order. "I am also formally removing my name from all debts associated with the Rowan family, including the secondary credit cards, the student loan Clark opened under my name in 2018, and the joint credit file my mother used to refinance the house in 2021. Jensen nodded and passed the court confirmation to Mrs. Camille, who began notarizing it in front of everyone. Clark jumped up, his voice shaky. "Wait. That loan in 2018, you signed it yourself?" I looked him directly in the eye, not angry, not sarcastic. Just the truth. "I never signed it. I have proof the signature was forged." I presented a copy of the loan application alongside my verified signature. Then I read aloud, "And I have also filed criminal charges for document forgery and unauthorized use of credit." Clark turned pale. The orange juice in his hand spilled onto the floor, but he didn't move. My mother snapped, "Are you really going to destroy this family? You're taking us to court." I answered her in the same tone she had used with me all my life. "I'm not destroying anything. I'm simply refusing to keep burying myself in things no one else dares to name." A relative on my aunt's side whispered, "Nevaeh, are you really doing this?" I turned to her, my smile softening, but my eyes stayed locked on my goal. "I am. Because if I don't, I become just another part of the silence that's dragged through 3 generations of this family. Women like my grandmother, like my mother, like me, we've all been taught that silence is a form of respect. But today I choose not to be silent anymore." Mrs. Camille closed the final folder, confirming all documents were complete. Clark looked down, his face drained of all color. Evelyn stood up but said nothing. Only her eyes, those eyes so used to commanding others, flickered with a realization. No one was following her anymore. I stood quietly, slinging my bag over my shoulder. Before walking out, I said one last thing. I didn't come here to take revenge. I came to end a chain of captivity disguised as family loyalty. From now on, whatever you do will have to stand on its own legs. I turned and walked away, the door closing behind me, not too loudly but firmly. Like a declaration in action, that I no longer belonged in the stifling air of that house. That real freedom doesn't begin with forms. It begins the moment you choose not to let fear hold you down another day. That package arrived on a brisk October morning, when the wind off the sea cut through the window frames and carried the briny scent of waves that never seemed to tire. The parcel wasn't large, its paper wrapping worn, but the sender's name printed on the upper left corner froze me in place. Richard Rowan, Bridgeview Nursing Center, Spokane. My father. The man who had vanished from my life when I was 13. Not a word. Not a phone call in over 20 years. I held the box like it contained a piece of memory long buried in sand. I didn't open it right away. I placed it on the small wooden table by the window, sat in Aaron's old reading chair, and stared at it a while longer as if willing it to explain why now. Eventually I opened it. Inside was a cream-colored envelope, tied with a simple red string. A folded sheet of paper, yellowed slightly, handwritten. The strokes firm but trembling, like someone who once wrote with ease but now fought time and illness. To Nevaeh, my daughter. If you're reading this, it means what I feared has happened. Your mother has done to you what she once did to me. You may never forgive me. Maybe you think I abandoned our family, left without a word. But the truth is, I was pushed out. Gently, quietly, through sweet words laced with disdain, by being made to feel like a burden, like a misfit. I wasn't strong enough to fight it then. But you are. Don't let anyone make you forget who you are. I stopped there. My heart skipped a beat. The air thickened around me, and memories I thought had long since shattered flickered back to life. My father being cut off mid-sentence by my mother. Evenings he sat alone in the garage reading investment paperwork. The exhaustion in his eyes when I asked why Mom never seemed happy to see him home early. I kept reading. I spent nearly 20 years living quietly. Not because I regretted leaving, but because I learned some truths can only be seen from a distance. And when you grow up, if you face the same kind of choices I once did, I want you to know, you're not alone. Attached to the letter was a neatly clipped folder. Stock transfer papers from an investment firm, Harborstone Equity Group. The shares, last valued at over $2.3 million, were in the name of Nevaeh Rowan. Below that was a confirmation document signed 5 years ago with a note. To activate when Nevaeh turns 30 or upon confirmation of a major family disruption by a third party. I laid the paper down on the table, my hands still trembling. It wasn't about the money. It was about its existence. Proof that someone once believed in me enough to prepare a safety net, even after walking away in silence. I stepped out onto the porch, the letter still in my hand, my eyes drawn to the sea. The sky was gray, the waves steady, and something inside me began to loosen. A knot I'd carried for years, thinking my father had left because he didn't love me enough. I went back inside and called Jensen, not to ask about how to claim the assets but something far simpler. Can I transfer these shares into Aaron's foundation? He was silent for a moment, then replied, You want to transfer all of it? No. I'm keeping a portion for reinvestment. The rest, I wanted to go toward a scholarship fund for firefighter training. For people like Aaron, like my father. The ones who build quietly, but are so often treated like they don't matter. Jensen nodded. Though I couldn't see him through the phone, I felt his agreement. I'll take care of it right away. But Nevaeh, your father would be proud. I looked back at the letter, slipped it into a glass frame and hung it on the wall beside my desk, where I'd see it every morning. Not as a tribute to a father who had passed, but as a reminder that silence isn't always abandonment. Some people love you by stepping back. And sometimes the most precious gifts aren't handed to you, but left behind, quietly waiting for the right moment to say you were never forgotten. I hung that painting on a morning thick with fog, when the ocean blurred into a white, still sheet like unwritten paper. My studio was bathed in soft gray light, so quiet I could hear the faint creak of the old wooden door each time the breeze pushed through. The painting, titled The Door Locked from the Inside, was nothing but abstract shapes in deep, cold tones, with thin slashes that felt like metal. No face, no form, just the sensation of being trapped in the space you once thought was safe. I didn't write a caption. Didn't tag anyone. No comment. I simply posted one photo. Me standing in front of my studio holding the painting, wind pushing my hair to one side. Behind me the old wooden door, chipped, bolted shut. The door that once led to the little corner Aaron called the light room. I never imagined a single image could travel so far. Or that it would stir up a silence long overdue for breaking. For hours after I posted it, my inbox started buzzing nonstop. Messages, emails, notifications from people I knew, used to know, and had never met. Many asked if the painting was for sale. But what made me pause was a message from Emily Hadley, Aaron's classmate from the Fire Academy, someone who'd attended our wedding but hadn't reached out since. Nevaeh, I'm sorry to say this over a message. But I think you should know. Aaron once told me Clark tried to force him into taking out a fake name loan during your first year of marriage. It was to cover a family investment Evelyn was trying to save. When Aaron refused, Clark threatened to lie about his credit history to the station's command board. Aaron didn't say much, just, "It's okay, they're her family. But I think you need to know now." I didn't reply right away. I just sat there, palms cold even as the late afternoon sun filtered in through the window. That night, I got an email from a journalist named Samantha Lee. She handled social investigations for a local news station. The subject line was simple: verification request, misappropriated assets and beneficiary rights. Her tone was calm and respectful. "We are investigating patterns of financial abuse within family systems in Pierce County. We have reason to believe you may have been a victim of credit fraud, unauthorized asset transfers, and interference with beneficiary rights. If you're open to sharing, we believe your story could help others feel less alone." I read the last part over and over. Feel less alone. Not revenge. Not exposure. Just the truth, no longer hidden under kitchen tables in basements or behind smiles signed family. I called her back. Samantha's voice was warm and steady, like each question she asked had been weighed with care. She didn't push me to recount details. Just asked, "When was the first time you felt like your voice was taken from you in your own home?" I don't remember my exact answer. But I remember crying. Not from pain, but from the relief of not having to hide the exhaustion behind the indifferent eyes of people I shared blood with. The story aired a week later. The headline was simple: "Women silenced in their own homes." My story sat alongside others. A mother coerced into co-signing a gambling-addicted son's loans. A young widow whose parents seized control of her bank accounts after her husband's death on the job. No names were named. But people figured it out. Anyone who'd ever met my family, been to their parties, exchanged emails, borrowed money, started putting pieces together behind the white-painted walls of Evelyn Rowan's house. The next day, the neighbors rescinded their invitation to the Harvest Festival. An old acquaintance who used to work with Clark pulled all promotional photos with his face. A charity group that Evelyn once claimed to be a financial advisor for quietly removed her name from their board. No one called to curse me out. No one attacked me publicly. But that silence, like a glass being set down on a damp table, was loud and unmistakable. I didn't have to knock on every door. The doors now knew what they had tried so hard to hide. One late afternoon, while I was rehanging artwork in the studio, I saw Delilah standing across the street, phone in hand, her face pale. She looked at me for a long time, then turned and walked away without a word. I didn't follow. She had nothing left to take. And nothing I needed returned. I went back inside, poured myself a glass of water, and looked in the mirror. My face was thinner but no longer hollow. My eyes were sunken but steady. There was no trace left of the daughter waiting for someone to walk in and save her. Now I was the one who had unlocked the door, from the inside. Then painted it. A reminder to myself: some doors should never be reopened. But they can still become art so others know they once existed. That morning the air was light with mist. The outer windows of the studio were fogged with early moisture, reflecting the soft yellow lights from the small beachside venue. I stood backstage holding a folded stack of notes, my heart as still as the sea waiting for wind. The launch event for the Silent Backbone Fund was anything but glamorous. No high stage. No confetti. No celebrity guest. Just hundreds of white plastic chairs arranged in a crescent on a simple wooden floor, with rope-strung lights swaying gently each time the ocean breeze swept through. The crowd was mostly women of all ages and shapes, but with one thing in common: a quiet gaze full of stories never told. I stepped out in a long dark blue dress, the color of post-storm ocean. The lights glowed faintly on the words behind me: the Silent Backbone Fund, restoring voices to those who were silenced. I took a deep breath and began. "Good evening. My name is Nevaeh Rowan. Some of you may have read about me, or heard my story through the media. But tonight I'm not here to retell the past. I'm here for something else." I looked around the room, letting my gaze rest on an elderly woman in the front row. She sat straight, clutching an old notebook, her face calm but her eyes holding decades of learned silence. "I created this scholarship fund because I used to believe that love meant endurance, meant patience, meant never disappointing anyone, never making anyone uncomfortable. But that's not love. That's silence. And it slowly makes us forget who we are." Someone nodded. A soft sniffle echoed from the back row. Kept going. I grew up in a house built with walls made of promises. Promises that if I behaved, I'd be loved. Promises that if I sacrificed, I'd be acknowledged. But I was never called someone's daughter with warmth. I was the one behind the spotlight, the name on every account, every responsibility, but never had a seat at the family table. I paused, fingers gently tightening around the paper in my hand, though I didn't look down. Everything I needed to say was already carved into memory. The only man who ever believed in my worth, my husband, is gone. But he left me more than just loss. He left me with a question. If I no longer had anyone to live for, could I learn to live for myself? I glanced at the words printed behind me, then looked back at the audience. The Silent Backbone Scholarship will support women who've been financially exploited by their own families. The ones whose names are on the accounts but who never got to make a choice. The ones holding the credit cards, too afraid to spend a single dollar on themselves. The ones called too sensitive for wanting control over their own lives. I gestured toward a display board set on the right side of the stage, listing the names of the first 12 women to receive support. Each had a short introduction. No full names. No job titles. Just simple statements like, I was loved, as long as I stayed obedient. Or, I signed 3 loans because I thought it was my duty. Behind me, the screen lit up with the door locked from the inside. That photo of me holding the painting, the one that once spread across the internet, was no longer evidence of a scandal. It had become the starting point of something new. I ended with one sentence. No tears. No trembling. Every woman deserves a home, a place where she doesn't have to pay with pieces of herself just to stay. Love is not silent endurance. Love is where you can speak your truth without fear of being erased from the family photo. No roaring applause. But the front row rose to their feet. Then the next. Gentle handshakes. Wet but steady eyes. A young woman took my hand and whispered, I've never had my name on the deed to my own home. But today, I'm going to ask for it. That night I walked barefoot along the sand, my father's letter in hand, the one he left behind like a quiet marker. Don't let them make you forget who you are. I stopped where the wet shore met the wind. The breeze wasn't cold, it just smelled like the sea I knew by heart. I held the letter tighter, not out of fear of losing it, but to feel my heart beat closer to the man who had protected me in silence from afar. I didn't cry, but I smiled. A smile that didn't need to hide behind tears. A smile that wasn't meant to please anyone. It was for me, for the woman who had stepped out of the house that once locked her in, by unlocking it herself. If you've listened this far, maybe you're asking yourself, what would you do? If your own family tried to erase you just because you stopped staying quiet, would you keep enduring or would you walk away like I did? I'm not telling this story to complain. I don't need pity. I'm telling it because I know there are many out there, especially women, still holding everything together in silence, even as they're being pushed further out. You might be living in a beautiful house but feel like a guest. You might be the one holding the bills, the signatures, the sacrifices, and no one remembers your name. If any part of my story speaks to something inside you, even the smallest part, leave a comment below. Share your thoughts or just write one line, that used to be me. Because sometimes, even a small admission can give someone else the courage to finally speak up. And if you believe stories like this, about family, about pain, about rebirth, deserve to be heard, hit subscribe. Because there are so many stories waiting to be listened to. Not to expose anyone, but to heal what's never had the words.